Hello and welcome to today's Logistics Management and Supply Chain Management Review podcast. My name is Michael Levans, and I'm Group Editorial Director for Peerless Media Supply Chain Group, which of course includes Logistics Management and Supply Chain Management Review magazines. And I'll be your moderator for today's episode, where we're going to define and explore the two very distinct evolutionary phases of parcel spend management. I don't believe I have to remind anyone joining us today that the logistics landscape and the parcel delivery landscape has undergone some significant transformation, particularly in the businesses, how the business manages and optimizes their parcel spend. As we're going to explain today, and we're going to take a look today, this transformation can be delineated into two distinct evolutionary phases: parcel spend management 1.0 and parcel spend management 2.0. And as our guest today will explain, each phase reflects a significant leap in technological adoption, strategic thinking, and operational efficiency. There are, of course, some key differences between the two phases, further highlighting how innovations in technology and process management have revolutionized parcel spend management. And to help us better understand these phases that are unfolding today, I'm joined by Josh Dunham, and Josh is co-founder of Reveel, a leading parcel spend management intelligence provider. Josh, welcome. We're so glad you can join us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding, Josh. So, in all of our conversations across LM and supply chain management review, we like to start by setting the table, right? Taking a snapshot of today's current environment. I made a quick mention of the significant transformation that's facing partial shippers today, right? And pretty much everyone joining us is really feeling that pressure. From your unique position of working with logistics professionals in the front lines, how would you define the current environment here? Here we are in, middle of 2024. How would you define this environment as it pertains to partial shipping right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say overall, kind of what we're seeing is we've come out of the pandemic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and everyone knows during the pandemic, a couple things that we saw was that volume kind of went through the roof when it came to shippers, right? So
Yep.
the
Yep.
carriers had the carriers had capacity constraints. We're seeing that is way behind us now. It's a completely different story, kind of where we're at today, where we see the carriers that they have capacity again. Shippers' volumes have decreased to more of a quote unquote norm.
Yep.
And as a byproduct of that, over the last couple of years, we've seen the carriers giving really, really aggressive pricing. So it's a great time to negotiate contracts and have those types of conversations with your carrier.
Yep.
Um, Also, in order to keep up with revenue commitments, one of the things that was big during the pandemic was carrier diversification.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so because of the capacity constraints, shippers were almost forced to look at alternate carriers to deliver their packages. What we're seeing now, because of volume levels coming down, is in order to keep up with revenue commitments with the national carriers like FedEx and UPS, we're seeing some companies have to kind of claw back some volume from some of the regional carriers or alternate carriers that they diversified to.
Yep.
Um, so in order to hit, yeah, like I said, revenue commitments or even
Yep.
like rebate structures that are put in place by the national carriers. But speaking of carrier diversification, that's kind of one of the interesting things that we're seeing going on kind of currently.
Mm-hmm.
That could even potentially challenge kind of this duopoly that FedEx and UPS have had on the national level. We've seen that USPS is evolving, rather quickly. We're seeing that they're actually evaluating some pretty significant network changes. They've added a new service with pretty competitive pricing that kind of challenges the ground model for FedEx and UPS. We've seen the on-track and LaserShip kind of merge.
Yep.
They can now on-track can now cover or deliver to 70% of the U.S. population.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really emerging as a potential challenger to FedEx and UPS on the national level. And then lastly, we saw kind of pre-pandemic, we saw Amazon begin this shipping service, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because of the capacity constraints during the pandemic, they kind of put a pause on that.
Yep.
Amazon has since kind of reinstated that delivery service, so they're now delivering packages again that are within their network, but they are delivering packages. So it'll be really interesting to see where they take that kind of here in the future.
Yep, absolutely. Great job of putting that transformation into perspective, Josh. Honestly, it's terrific. Great big snapshot. I love that. Now, based on this new reality, and everything you just shared with us there, Josh, is there a way you can maybe boil down to one or two of the biggest challenges facing parcel shippers in terms of parcel spend management these days? What are one or two of those biggest challenges evolving out of that reality that you just so nicely defined for us?
Yeah. So, we talked a lot about, how the parcel space is changing. One thing that we've seen, at least over the last couple of years, that hasn't changed, is that the carriers are still using the same tactics that they have to increase rates,
Hmm.
right? So we saw at the beginning of this year a 5.9% rate increase. We ran the numbers on that and did the analysis. It actually turned out to about 8% on average between the two
Hmm.
carriers in regard to a rate increase at the beginning of the year. We saw that the carriers instituted new zip codes for their delivery area surcharges. So
Yep.
that was an increase to shipping. That occurred this year.
Yep.
And then the other thing that occurred this year is both carriers made changes to their fuel surcharges.
Mhm.
So there are things changing in the space, but one thing remains the same. FedEx and UPS are using kind of similar tactics to increase pricing.
Yep.
So that kind of brings us to one of the major issues that that shippers face, and it really kind of boils down to transparency
Yep.
and really kind of lack thereof.
Mhm.
Um, parcel is really it's the fastest growing modality in shipping, and I would argue that it's also the most complex.
Yep.
When it comes to the carrier data as well as the carrier agreements, it's really difficult,
Yep.
to kind of get a handle on both of them.
Yep.
And in order to manage this effectively, shippers really have to have enhanced visibility, and you just can't
Absolutely.
get that from the carriers. So that's a huge
Absolutely.
issue.
Absolutely huge. Let's dive into that, Josh. Let's dive into how shippers can get a handle on that visibility, how to get a handle on that parcel spend. Now, we've alluded to two distinct evolutionary phases, right? I mentioned Parcel Spend Management 1.0 and Parcel Spend Management 2.0. So let's kind of put some context around that, Josh. How do you define Parcel Spend Management 1.0? What is that? Define that for us.
Yeah, so think of parcel spend management, or I'll abbreviate it and say PSM
Hmm.
1.0. So think of PSM 1.0 as kind of the industry's really kind of first or initial approach to managing parcel expenses.
Yep.
And this is going to be, think of it as like basically consulting firms that have introduced tech enabled managed service to
Hmm.
help manage parcel spend.
Yep.
And we know PSM 1.0 well, because that's quite honestly, what we were
What
for
you do.
for
Yeah.
many years.
Yep.
And you can think of it as being characterized by manual processes, limited
Hmm.
visibility to the shipper, and a very kind of reactive stance towards parcel spend management or cost management.
Now let's go into some of those features. Now you mentioned the manual side of it. What are some of the other features of PSM 1.0, Josh?
Yeah, well, PSM 1.0 really at its heart is it's a managed service.
Yep.
So providers, more often than not, they're relying on manual data analysis, manual
Yep.
processing, and it leads to not only inefficiencies but a higher likelihood of errors.
Yep.
Other things that characterize PSM 1.0 would be higher costs. If
Yep.
you think about manual analysis requires expertise, it requires
Hmm.
people. As a byproduct of that, those people and that expertise is expensive.
Right.
So naturally, PSM 1.0 providers have higher cost structures, and they need to pass those cost structures on to the customer.
Hmm.
One of
Hmm.
the other things that we saw a ton when we were, in the 1.0 space, was that when we, as the provider, had employee turnover, it was a really big deal for our customers or for shippers,
Yep.
because when you're heavily reliant on people to do the work, when those
Hmm.
people leave,
Yep.
it really decreases responsiveness and quality.
Right.
Our customers, when we were 1.0 providers, had limited visibility.
Hmm.
So really kind of a lack of meaningful data and analytics made it difficult to understand kind of patterns in your spend, identify areas for potential cost reduction without the help of the consultant.
Right. Right.
Um, it, PSM 1.0 is very reactive
Hmm.
um, because it relies on people. It doesn't necessarily live in real time. Um, and as a byproduct of that, shippers become aware of potential problems much later.
Hmm.
So they became, aware kind of down the road. And then I would say the last thing that it kind of does internally for shippers, PSM 1.0 really, it doesn't bolster um, transparency and
Yep.
collaboration within
Right.
shippers. We
Right.
see kind
Right.
of this siloed approach when it comes to departments within
Sure.
shippers. So
Yep.
think about your operations, your finance, your procurement department. They become very siloed because they don't really have, visibility, cross departmentally, and they kind of work in these silos. So
Yep.
those are
Gotcha.
several of the things that we used to be that we see in the PSM 1.0 solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep seeing in my head that employee with had all that institutional knowledge, then that person sort of takes off and go, oh, geez, we lost all that knowledge in that one person as well. So I can totally see how that would be limiting. Okay, so there we have like a more traditional tech-enabled managed service approach. Now we mentioned, we're evolving, right? Shifting to a more data-driven approach. Now, Josh, how would you define this next step, or let's call it PSM 2.0? Give us a little bit of a background on how you would define PSM 2.0. Where are we now?
Yeah, so this really kind of evolved as a result of our customers asking us for something more, asking us for something different. They said, "Hey, don't get us wrong. We like what you're doing. We like what
Hmm.
you're offering us, but there has to be a better way."
Hmm.
So ultimately, we created this Parcel Spend Management 2.0. And think of it really as the inverse of 1.0. Whereas
Yep.
1.0 is tech enabled managed service, 2.0 is really a customer facing technology platform at its
Hmm.
core, and it's supported by a world class support team.
Yep.
And really, what this does is it brings way for a more strategic, data driven approach. We have the ability to leverage kind of more modern technologies like AI, machine learning, modeling, simulation, and we
Hmm.
can use those things to optimize parcel spend.
Yep. Yep. Outstanding. So let's dive into some of those features then, Josh, with PSM 2.0. What are some of those areas now that you can really focus in on that shows us that evolution?
Yeah, first and foremost, advanced analytics, BI tools.
Yep.
So, being able to use things like AI and machine learning, being able to run kind of modeling and simulation over your shipping profile and your data. We have the ability to run machine derived actionable
Yep.
insights.
Hmm.
And all of these things, really help the shipper make data driven decisions.
Yep.
I would say the other features that characterize PSM 2.0 would be proactive spend management as
Yep.
opposed to reactive.
Hmm.
So we have the ability by using things like predictive analytics to stop overspend before it occurs, as
Hmm.
opposed to after waiting for a person to let you know of a problem.
Right.
And then the other thing is that it really increases the collaboration within shippers' organizations.
Hmm.
So it removes the silos, that
Yep.
we so often see. It increases communication, cross departmentally.
Yep, yep, outstanding. Now, with this understood, and what you say are the key, what would you say are the key differences and the implications and benefits to taking that step from 1.0 to 2.0? So, what would you say are those key benefits, Josh, from making that leap or to making that leap?
Yeah, well, making the leap from 1.0 to 2.0, I mean, it really represents kind of a paradigm shift, in our
Sure.
in our space,
Hmm.
and it's just a paradigm shift with how businesses approach parcel spend management. And I would say first and foremost, the key difference is really the adoption of technology and the fact that PSM 2.0 is a technology platform.
Hmm.
Now, this technology, at least in our space, it's being viewed as very disruptive.
Yep.
And the reason that it is being viewed as disruptive is because it empowers the shipper with the tools that they need to make data driven decisions, as
Hmm.
opposed to being reliant upon a consultant. Now, that's a very, very drastic change in our
Absolutely.
space.
Absolutely.
And as a byproduct of that, the customers get a better experience.
Hmm.
With a technology platform or solution, there's no waiting for a person to do an analysis. There's no
Hmm.
waiting 2 or 3 weeks to turn around, analyzing, whether it's a data project you had them do or a carrier agreement. And, the quality of the service is a lot better as a byproduct of it being technology. And then I
Yep.
would say the other thing is we have the ability to focus our efforts on a world-class customer success team. So
Yep.
our response times to inquiries are under 5 minutes, which is
Hmm.
just unheard of under
Yep.
our other model.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Um, yeah, and then I would say the other thing is it really signifies kind of a move from a reactive to a proactive strategy. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but because the technology lives in real time, shippers can take a proactive
Yep,
approach to spend
absolutely.
management. So you don't have to wait for a person to let you know of problems. You don't have
Yep,
to wait until your quarterly business review to be aware of or to be made aware, that there's an issue.
yep,
So those are kind of key differences.
yep.
But in regard to some of the major benefits that you get from 2.0, kind of first and foremost, it's peace of mind.
Mhm.
It's peace of mind knowing that you've got the help of a cutting edge technology to know that you're in the best possible space when it comes to parcel spend management. Other benefits would be, reduced parcel spend. So optimizing and monitoring your carrier contracts on a regular basis, having, carrier level optimization, service level optimization, surcharge optimization. You have the ability to really reduce your parcel spend. We have the ability to help customers or shippers improve their operational and financial efficiency. So automating manual processes that shippers are having to do and integrating kind of systems internally seamlessly for
Mhm.
shippers. And then it once again, I mean, it enhances their visibility and their
Right,
control.
right.
It allows businesses to make more informed decisions.
Mhm.
Um, say another key benefit is that employee turnover, at least within the PSM provider, is way less disruptive
Yep,
because there's more of a reliance on technology as opposed to the people.
right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, and then I would say finally, like the biggest thing and the biggest benefit to shippers is that it PSM tools and specifically PSM 2.0, it can help create competitive advantage.
Mhm.
So most industries and most shippers that we talk to, their industries are extremely competitive,
Mhm.
and kind of getting parcel right, it can really help create and sustain kind of competitive advantages within shippers industry.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Josh, we are up against the clock, so we're going to have to wrap up here in a couple of moments. But I do like to get would like to get like one or two key takeaways that you would like to have resonate for parcel shippers joining us today, who are maybe looking to take that step forward, either stepping into 1.0 or making that leap from 1.0 to 2.0. What's one or two sort of key takeaways you'd really like to have resonate with our attendees today?
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. Parcel shipping, it's complex.
Right.
there's
Yeah.
no there's no way
No
around
doubt.
it. Yeah, it's very complex. Getting it right it requires expertise.
Yep.
Um, and PSM tools, it really does help bridge the gap for both experts as well as non-experts.
Hmm.
And it gives them what they need to succeed in
Hmm.
this area of their business.
Yep.
And, really these tools will help shippers. It'll help their businesses for sustainable growth and success in a very competitive landscape. And the consequences of not getting this right in your parcel spend can be very, very serious.
Yep, absolutely. Now, to wrap us up, for shippers taking that first step, what do they do next, Josh? Is there a place we can steer them? Where do they need to go to maybe get a demo?
Yeah, I think that is the best next step is
Yep.
to reach out to us. I think, they can go to our website. It's
Hmm.
Reveel, Reveel group.com.
Hmm. Hmm.
They can get in touch with us there. And I think the best next step is to do a demonstration,
Yep.
with the shipper's data. And we're pretty transparent when it comes to the demos. We just show them, kind
Yep.
of here's your data and here's kind of what we're seeing. Here's some of the
Hmm.
potential issues and here's where you're performing, particularly well. I think that's the best thing for shippers to do.
Absolutely. Ultimate visibility right there. I love it. Now, we are up against the clock. Now, Josh Dunham, co founder of Reveal, I want to thank you so much for attending today or and help making this happen today. We really appreciate your insights and thanks for being part of this episode today.
This was great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for attending. And I hope everybody got a lot out of this today. I know I did. And have a great day. Thank you very much.